You're probably wondering what I'm doing, sitting here beside this funny old chair. Well, here's the story. This chair was the favourite chair of Admiral Lord Nelson himself. And how it comes to be in this room is a set of curious chances. It was saved after the Battle of Trafalgar by the master of one of the vessels that was near to Nelson. In due course, the chair came from him into the possession of one of the great London private chart makers. I'm not sure which one it was, but it was probably the forerunner of Imray, Laurie, or possibly Norie, maybe even Wilson, because where I'm sitting now is actually in the offices of Imray Laurie Norie and Wilson, who are the world's premier makers of private charts. Now, the story of this chart making business and how it came about and how it predated the Admiralty is a fascinating one, and I'm just going to cover a little bit of that in this chat this afternoon, and then we'll have a look at what they're doing today and how they've moved from copperplate and men with tiny little pens to young people working with computers in a lovely lit room. So here we go. First up, I'm going to meet Lucy Wilson, who runs the show here. It's a good old family business. When I first came here doing the Shell Channel pilot, it was Lucy's dad, Willie, who ran it. But Lucy's taken over, and I'm looking at all these wonderful things you've put out on the table for me here. But what absolutely fascinates me is this. Can we open it up? This, unless I'm much mistaken, my goodness, look at it. This is an original blueback chart, isn't it?
Yeah.
What sort of year is this?
This will be from sometime during the 1800s.
Golly. Well, it's a chart of the Eastern Mediterranean. It's running from Sicily down to the Asia Minor. And look, we've got plans which expand where you need it expanded. The chart's a great big picture of the whole thing. You could get yourself from A to B with that, but when you got there, you needed to get in. If you didn't want to stump up for a load of extra charts, this chart would do it for you. And it's just like you do now, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's the model for what we produce today. So the idea is that you can buy one chart with all of the information that you need to navigate safely into a harbour, rather than having to fork out for 5 or 6 charts of different scales. And even there are little approach drawings, so you can see what the view might have been as you approach.
These are very beautiful, aren't they? I love these little plans. I used to see these on Admiralty charts years ago, but they've all gone now. We don't have them anymore, do we?
Absolutely.
I think it was in the 1830s sometime, unless I'm wrong, that the Admiralty actually started making what they like to call official charts. Yeah. But before then, all this information was available, and it was done privately in Britain.
And they were all based around the City of London and the Docklands, where the East India Company was trading, and they really supplied charts to merchant ships. And it wasn't until the 20th century that Imray became known for yachting charts.
Right up till, well, into the 20th century. Yeah. As I understand it, the merchant captains still preferred these to the Admiralty charts. They were more expensive, weren't they?
Yeah, good quality.
Yeah. And but a better deal in the end. Yes. So what have we got here?
So this one's from 1800, and again I thought that was a really good example because it's hand drawn, but it essentially has all the information on it that Imray pilot books and charts have today. So it's got some sailing directions here.
Oh my goodness, yes.
All the navigational information, depths.
Surveyed by Francis Owen, master of His Majesty's ship Agincourt. Well, that's interesting because that was an Admiralty surveyor. And yet he must have sold his information to the private chart makers, because the Admiralty hadn't thought about doing their own.
No.
That's very interesting. That's Shoal there. This is a notoriously popular place for ships to pile up. Yeah. Yachts have piled up there in fairly recent times. Yeah, well, again, using vector charts. Yeah. They scale it out to do the passage plan on the vector chart. The shoal disappears. Yeah. Doesn't disappear on air, does it?
Yeah, exactly. We've got some of the Andaman Islands, and one of the islands is marked, you know, don't land on this island, cannibals are known to inhabit it.
Now look, there's some wonderful paintings on these walls as well. Who's this chap?
So this is John Norie.
Norie?
He's famous for his Norrie's nautical tables.
Look at that. I've got a copy of this from 1972. And when I was doing my astronavigation, when there was no other way to navigate, before I discovered sight reduction tables, which my father-in-law, who was a pilot, introduced me to, I used to use Norrie's tables, and my book had a black cover, and it was more like that sort of size. What have we got here?
So this is the 1810 edition.
Whoa!
Essentially, the information is the same. It's obviously been updated, but it explains to you how to...
Can I touch it?
Yeah.
Without white gloves?
Yeah.
When I was a young sailor in the early 1970s, Norrie was the Bible. If you didn't have any sight reduction tables, which I didn't in my early days, you had to use all sorts of clever mathematical tables to work out your latitude and longitude. He even tells you how to work a lunar observation, and that is something that a lot of people would really be interested in. And maybe I'll do that another time, because before we had chronometers, the lunar distance was how you could work your longitude. It wasn't available every day. It depended on what you could see and what you couldn't in the sky. And it was extremely tortuous to have to work out. These are what you call traverse tables. If you're in one point on the chart and you've gone a certain distance in a certain direction, these will tell you where you are. And I would think at the back, yes, here we are, logarithmic, sines, tangents and secants. These are the tables that we had to use for doing the actual mathematics in those days. And I'm very pleased to tell you that all this has been rendered completely redundant by the modern sight reduction table, but Norrie was your man. Oh, that's a wonderful thing. Goodness me. Sorry, I'm probably being a bit boring here for anybody who's watching this, but this sort of thing's lifeblood to me. Anyway, look, Lucy, I think what we should do, having had a look at some of these, is go upstairs and see what they're up to. Oh, God, it's a while since I've been in here. So this is the chart drawing office, Lucy?
Yeah, so this is where the cartographers sit and work.
Yeah, it's changed a lot since I was first here 20 years ago, 25 years ago. I remember Jo, who works downstairs, was sitting at a desk right there, and she was physically drawing on a chart. Yeah. And that's all changed. We're surrounded by computer screens. Imray charts, as we now call them, it's Imray, Laurie, Norie and Wilson, but for brevity they're always known as Imray, even though it's Wilson really. So Imray charts are paper charts. That's what they've always been. They have the characteristics we've already discussed, but they're now making electronic charts. And the electronic charts they're doing are what's called a raster chart. And a raster chart looks exactly like a paper chart. It has the same characteristics. You can't zoom in on it. It is what it is. And if you need more detail, you have to bring up another chart which gives you more detail. I rather like that, because what you see is what you get and you know where you stand. There's none of this clicking on something and seeing what you can find out about it. So that's what a raster chart is. Now, when they first appeared, electronic charts, what we used to say was that a raster chart was a chart that was produced by literally a physical scan of a paper chart. And a vector chart, which is the sort of chart you find on most chart plotters, charts like Navionics charts, for example, are produced by vectorized data, which is supplied by modern survey methods, amongst other things. What I've discovered here today, because I was having a bit of a chat earlier on with the guys in here, is that actually today's raster charts very often are developed from vectorized data, but they still look exactly like the paper charts. There's some vectorized data here that we can have a look at. It's completely baffling. It means absolutely nothing to me, but Hugh knows all about it, but it's a mystery to me. In the other corner, where John is working, the things going on that are a lot more comprehensible to me, Lucy, so you can actually see charts happening on them. Absolutely.
So John's importing vector data and it's being styled to look like an Imray chart. So essentially we'll be able to use the same source material, so the electronic navigation chart, ENC vector data, and we'll be able to produce a raster chart or a paper chart or in due course a Imray vector chart.
All out of
one database.
pot.
Yeah. So John's working on a new folio of Scottish charts, using vector data as the source material to produce paper charts and raster charts for our chart app.
John, to me a raster chart is just a paper scan, you know, it looks like a photo of the chart, but actually you're getting the data from this mysterious source called vectorized data, which I don't really understand. I mean, where does it come from?
So the vector data is from the UKHO, and we take it and we run it through a process, and the process returns it into this software, which is Map Publisher in Adobe Illustrator. And then I edit it and change it and thin out things and add extra information and make it into a vector chart, which you would see as a paper chart or in our chart app.
So how do you decide what you're going to add and what you're going to leave out?
Well, it's all based on our scheme, so a lot of information isn't very important for yachters, so we'll take all of that out to begin with.
Yeah, what sort of thing would that be?
That would be 30-metre contours or stuff like that.
But you leave the rocks in?
Yes, of course, everything important.
Yeah. And how do you make it look like an Imray chart, which has a very distinct look about it, hasn't it?
That's all done automatically using the software that we use, so it's formatted in the way that we like by the software before I even look at it, really.
Really? So what am I looking at here then?
This is the Cumbraes in Scotland.
Oh yes.
And this is part of our 2900 Atlas pack. And this is quite large scale of the island, showing the passages in between towards Glasgow from the Firth of Clyde. This is the largest scale coverage in the pack, and there'll be different scale bands. And we also will have inset plans of the harbours and the ports.
And you'll put those on there, will you?
Yes, and that'll be using larger scale data.
I see. This is the magic of these charts, really, I think. It's the fact that you can buy a chart that tells you basically the whole big picture of what's happening, but it zooms in on the bit that you really want, so you don't have to buy half a dozen charts. You can get one and it'll basically get you through. I see that you've got paper charts around you, even though you're working on these screens. What are these about?
These are just to help guide the amount of detail that we want to show. So the detail will often, as it comes in from the vector data, will be far too cluttered, so there'll be too much of it, and we want to thin it out and show the really important detail.
Yes, I'm looking here. This is Cumbrae here, isn't it?
Yes, so this is a much smaller scale chart.
Yeah.
The level of detail shown here will be much lower than what I'm showing on the screen.
What really impresses me about you guys, are you a sailor?
No.
No. You see, very few of the people in here are sailors. And yet you get this right. I know you do, because I use your charts, and it's great next time I use one, I know that you did it, which will be very pleasing for me. But this has been going on since the 18th century. Guys who didn't really go to sea produced charts of a superb quality for people who did go to sea. And you'd think you'd have to have sailors doing it, but you don't. You've got to have cartographers with real background who understand what sailors need. And to me, it's a miracle that you do it. You take it in your stride, don't you? It's a day's work for you. You go home at night and have a pint or whatever it is you do, and that's it. But to me, it's a miracle that you're able to do it. Wow. Well, in a sense, this looks more like it. I can see a man in here working on a paper chart. Matt!
Hi Tom, how are you doing?
It's nice to see you after
Nice to see you
so
too.
long. I've left Lucy downstairs. She's putting a fire out.
Yeah,
But,
good.
What's happening in here then, Matt?
Well, right this very moment, we're doing a final proof of a new edition paper chart that's about to be released of Atlantic Portugal and northern Spain. We derive this particular chart from a number of sources. In this instance, we've got UKHO paper charts, Portuguese and Spanish charts as well. But I'm just cross-referencing at the moment against one of our own guides, Atlantic Spain and Portugal.
Yes.
Which has recently been updated. So the purpose of people buying these charts and also our guides is the fact they can be used alongside each other.
Yep.
So I'm basically just lifting the latest information from our pilot guide to also apply it to our charts. So I'm looking for the latest anchorages maybe, or the latest restrictions that haven't filtered through to notice to mariners.
So you're literally reading the sailing directions from there.
Pretty
Making
much.
sure that makes sense with what you're seeing on here, and if it doesn't, a bell rings and you...
A classic example here is that in this particular harbour here, we've got the area which is derived from a UKHO chart in this instance, and they've got this the main channel going through here with all of these set depth soundings, which up here tells me this survey was 2012 it was done. But in our latest pilot guide, actually, there aren't these depths through here. It's all been dredged to 8 metres.
Ah.
So this is a classic example of where we're using official hydrographic data, but supplementing it with our own derived information. Everything we publish goes through at least 3, 4, sometimes 5 different stages of checking before it ever gets published. So this is going to print this week, and it'll be available to buy by a customer on Friday.
Hot off the press.
Yeah, well, now we digitally print all of our charts, or most of our charts. The turnaround is so quick. It used to be with litho presses, it used to take up to a month from finishing the chart to actually getting it out to a customer. Yeah. Now I could sign this one off at the end of today. We could print it tomorrow. They could be going out to customers on back order by tomorrow's post.
That's fantastic, isn't it? You know, we live in enlightened times, don't we?
We do, we do.
Things are steadily moving ahead from the days when the guys had to draw the charts on etch them on a piece of copper, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, it's still an art. It's just a different kind of art now, I suppose. Cartography and how these all of our charts and books are produced.
So you do this with my pilot book, do you? The Shell Pilot, when we got a new one out?
We definitely do. Yeah, we do. Yeah.
I've got to be careful then, haven't I?
We'll keep an eye on your work.
Yeah, good. Look at all this.
Yeah, so now we're at the printing works and warehouse where we distribute all our books from. And we moved over to digital printing about 4 years ago.
Right, so what we've got here, I can see a big machine here with charts sticking out of it. Is that where it actually happens?
Yeah, so this is the page-wide printer, and it uses reels of paper. It's got a special coating on it so that it fixes the water-based inks and makes the charts waterproof, essentially.
That's amazing, isn't it?
So you can submerge a chart in a glass of water for 24 hours.
And it's not plastic?
No, not plastic. It's made from paper and latex. It took us a long time to develop the coating.
I mean, this is just a universe away from copper plates, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Being pressed down onto something. I mean, how did that work?
Absolutely. So originally, the cartographers drew with etching materials onto copper plates, and the plates were etched and then stamped onto a piece of paper, essentially. Yeah. And that developed through the 19th and 20th century.
Whoever did the etching, what a job!
I know. Hours. Obviously it's so much more efficient now. So the guys up in the drawing office, they send their file over and it eventually gets fed out of the printer.
Right, so it goes off to the customer the same day?
Absolutely, yeah. Since using this technology we can produce much shorter print runs, so we don't need, we can update more frequently, and we're not stuck with stock for 4 years or...
Yeah, well I know as a writer that when you're publishing books, if you print 50,000, you get them for threepence halfpenny. If you print 500, it's a lot of money per book. So if you can do, I mean, I can see how this is going to work. You just, if somebody wants a chart, you could literally print one off.
Absolutely, yeah.
Do you want to give us a note? Sir, let's see what happens. You can't imagine what's going on in there, can you? Look at this. Here they come.
Here they come.
My
so
goodness.
Within a matter of minutes you could have 100 odd charts ready and waiting.
Well, well, well. Can I grab one off?
Yeah.
It's dry.
It's dry, yeah.
And it's cold. So you could take it away and fold it straight away?
Yeah, absolutely.
I've got to ask you this. Yeah. How do you fold them? I'm dead curious about this. I bet a lot of other people will be too. What's going to happen?
We have to do 2 folds.
Oh dear. Amazing.
So when you go to the UKHO, they've got a huge warehouse which does the whole process automatically.
Look at that. Ready to go. It's astonishing how far chart making has come.
It is, isn't it?
From the early days when they were knocking out charts down in the City of London before the Admiralty had even thought of doing it. And you're still doing it here.
Still doing it here,
And you're still light years ahead.
Yeah, hope so.
Thanks very much.
You're welcome.
That's been just a great day.
Good, good.